Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be looking at something that's kind of cringy, because it kind of relates to another thing, and that is Natalie Portman released a book on October 20th, so at the time of the making of this video it would have been 3 days ago. I just heard about it today, and basically this book is called Natalie Portman's Fables, and the reason why I'm highlighting this is because this is very literally simply a retelling of three classic children's fairy tales. The Tortoise and the Hare, City Mouse, and Country Mouse, which that's one that I haven't really heard of, and The Three Little Pigs. And supposedly the reason why she did this, and this is in her own words, she said that she did this because she wanted to update these stories for modern kids, and because she wanted to insert more female characters into it, because she felt there was a lack of female representation in fairy tales. So let's cross this one off the list first before we dive into anything else. She's full of shit, because basically she chose the three fairy tales that do not have a female character. Most fairy tales actually have a female protagonist. Which is odd. You look at Little Red Riding Hood; she's the protagonist. Actually, the only male human character in that story is the huntsman at the end. The only character other than the wolf, who's a crossdresser. Then you have Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Obviously, Goldilocks is the main character. You also have Mama Bear in that scenario. Snow White. You can look at any of the older Disney stuff that is derived from fairy tales too. I mean, even Little Mermaid, that was based around a female character. Back even when it was a story, before Disney made a movie out of it. Same thing with Snow White. You can look back at the old woman that lived in the shoe. There are so many. Hansel and Gretel, one of the main characters and the main villain, are both females. You have stuff like Rapunzel, the main. I think if I remember correctly, I mean, she is kind of the main character in that, but there's also she shares it with the prince. But at the same time, it's like one of your main characters is still a female. Almost any fairy tale you can point out and say there are major female characters in this fairy tale. So she's an idiot. But aside from, I think most people knew that anyway. But aside from that, the stories, the way that she updated them is basically with this really dumb, kind of very childish, gross out, oh, hey, look, it's poop type of humor. Instead of the Three Little Pigs, instead of one of their houses being made out of sticks, it's made out of stacked up takeout containers. It's okay, are you saying that are you creating pigs and obesity and stuff? Here's the problem with it too, is that she says this and she's updated this when these stories were made for children. They're not made for they weren't made for adults. Now they might be a little darker than maybe what we would consider children's entertainment today, but at the same time, the stories are very simply written, and most of the time they're being read to children. Children are not reading them on their own, so parents can choose to interpret or phrase it however they want. It's not like you have to phrase it a particular way in order for the child to understand, because they're really not even reading it most of the time. And even if they are reading it, they're usually, again, probably there with a parent who's either helping them along, or if they're old enough to read, then maybe they're reading it on their own already, because it's very, very simple. So that's another thing that was very odd about it. But it goes into more of an again, it's very, very, very cringy, but it goes into more of an issue with Hollywood in the sense of laziness. In terms of storytelling and things like that over I've beat this horse to death already, but over originality and over even something like parody, because that's the thing is, if this was parody, I think it would be palatable to an extent, because it's meant to be a parody of something. It's meant to, but at the same time, the fairy tales, sometimes they can be humorous, but a lot of times they're very dark and messed up. But if you're going to do a parody of it, then it's supposed to be, funny, and we're making fun of things and stuff like that. This is not a parody. This is literally just telling the same story over again and dumbing it down even more than it already was. Which, again, is something that Hollywood is doing with a lot of films these days. Because they have these writers and actors and directors that are not very good at their craft in many cases, and they recycle the same guys over and over and over again. Especially for writers, Alex Kurtzman and Robert Orsi, and people like that. People like I can't remember the exact name of the guy. I think it was with a G, but it was the guy that wrote basically the Blade movies, at least the first two. I think he wrote the third one as well. He's literally admitted the fact he can't write stories. He can't write dialogue. The only thing he's good at is story structure. That is not a writer you want to hire for a project if all he can do is story structure, unless you have a writing room with people that actually can write. You don't want to give that guy a sole writing credit. Those are the type of people that Hollywood is recycling, and that's basically what Natalie Portman did with this book. Is she just half-assed the whole thing and did I don't care what people say about it. That's what it is. She half-assed the whole thing, and then put out a product that just reads like a trashier version of all of those fairy tales with a bunch of stupid crap mixed into it that makes absolutely no sense. And that's the other thing is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's a very old adage, but the idea that there's nothing wrong with the fairy tales, so why are you trying to fix them? And why are you seeing things that are very obviously not there? That's even weirder to me. But like I said, Hollywood's been doing the same thing with a lot of their films, especially their franchise films, lately. Probably the last 10 years or so has been a very serious uptick in it. But it's the idea of, I shouldn't say that because it's been upticking for a while, at least with the remake bug. But the idea is you can put it, and I understand this from a business aspect, you can put in a minimal amount of effort for maximum product. Or maximum productivity, maximum returns on what you're putting in, and that's kind of the idea of well, maybe not necessarily all business, but the kind of one of the ideas of business is the idea of, you want to get the most for what you're putting in. So, but what they're doing is they're putting in as little creative effort as possible, and they're putting out basically what I would consider to be a sterile, safe product in some respects, and some it's just cringy and stupid. But some of it is just, very sterile, very safe. A lot of like a J.J. Abrams movie, basically. Very sterile, very safe, does not really take a lot of risks, doesn't do anything amazing, but it is tolerable mainly to the audience that it's aimed at. And you have to take that into consideration a little bit when you're making a film, because you have to have a demographic, and I've been over this before, in other videos. Demographics do fucking exist. So you have to understand who your audience is for this film if you're making a movie. But at the same time, you shouldn't have to compromise creative choices for the film to meet the audience, because now you've gone to a point where you're changing the creative vision in order to appease to the audience, which is a lot of what Hollywood does whenever they ship stuff over to China. There's been a lot of jokes that have popped up in movies. I think one of them was in one of the Transformers films, which did very well in China. At least I think the later ones did. And basically, there was a joke that was made. I think it was the fifth one. There was a joke that was made on set. It was in the script, and Michael Bay removed it. And the reason, one of the actors stated the reason why he removed it was because that joke would not fly in China. And that's where we're at now. We're at a point where instead of just editing a film before we send it somewhere, we're editing it before it's even fucking released, and then we're releasing the film to be palatable to other audiences. What happened to just hiring an editor and making different edits to the fucking film? Or hell, just film the scene twice and have them say two different things, or maybe just have it so that the editor cuts the joke out. And that's another thing too, is when you talk about the lack of effort, sound editing today is god fucking awful. I went over that a little bit, and I had a stream with Weaponized Nerd Rage last weekend where we kind of discussed that on air, which was the idea of sound editing has gone to shit. A lot of the writing has degraded significantly. The talent, the overall talent that is involved with a lot of filmmaking has degraded to an extent. And really, a lot of what studios are mainly worried about is the visuals, is the CGI and how that looks, and does it look flashy and cool? And probably a reason why J.J. Abrams has a bunch of lens flares in his movies. But does this look flashy? Does it look cool? Is it going to catch people? That's kind of the idea that a lot of that a lot of higher end, well, I shouldn't say higher end, but a lot of larger studios take with their tentpole films and their blockbuster films these days, especially stuff like Disney and stuff like that, all the movies that they release. Um, and really, all it equates to is a film that is really, really fun to look at, but is not very good if you dig deeper into it. It's a film that does not age well. It's a film, I keep referring back to my videos, but I made a video about, what makes a film timeless, and that's basically the opposite of what a lot of blockbuster films are doing today. Is they are not making themselves timeless, so that people will enjoy them for years to come. They are dating themselves within years after their release. You have jokes in there that nobody's going to get 10 years from now unless they say, oh, yeah, I kind of remember that. Something like that, more pertinent type of stuff. It's the generalization stuff. It's the general stuff that appeals to the kind of the base levels of what we find to be funny or entertaining that kind of stick around for the most part. And a lot of these movies don't have that because they're being hammered with a lot of this, recycled messages and things like that. And when I say recycled, I mean the idea of, okay, Day the Earth Stood Still is a great example. The original was based around the idea of nuclear power, of nuclear radiation. Period. The power of the A bomb and the power of using nuclear power. And that was supposed to be the overall message of the film, was that we need to be careful with this. And that makes complete sense because we nuked two places in Japan, and we know what nuclear weapons do. We know what radioactivity does. So yes, you need to be fucking careful with that shit. And that was at a point in time when I think the Russians may have just acquired the A bomb. It was 1951. So I think the Russians may have just acquired the atomic bomb, or maybe not long before that. So you had this whole nuclear arms race. That was at the time when you had the duck and cover videos and stuff they were showing to kids in schools and things like that. And people legitimately thought that the world was going to end. Nuclear holocaust, which is something that was a possibility at the time. So that made sense. But then you go to the remake of it, the one they did with Keanu Reeves when he was in that rut situation in his career. And that one is horrible because all that's about is the aliens don't want us destroying the Earth. Well, if that's the case, then and the other thing is that originally, in the original film, Klaatu, who's the alien man that comes from outer space, he is there with a message of peace, and the Earthlings are very hostile to him, but he doesn't do anything to provoke them. In this, it's like the Gork robot just immediately turns into a swarm of locusts and starts destroying various structures across the planet, and apparently Gork has the power to destroy the entire planet, which, I mean, I think they mentioned that in the original, that he has the power to destroy, basically everything that they have, with his little, death beam thing. But again, they never really show that. They just show him nuking a few tanks and some guns and stuff like that. I have a funny feeling that he'd probably get blown up at some point. But the point is that in the newer one, it's no, Gork does not need to transform into a giant swarm of locusts. That does not need to happen. And the overall message of the film was built around environmentalism, which a lot of people, especially at the time even, were kind of, it's kind of like I should say it's a joke because we should respect the environment, but the point is that it's kind of a joke in the sense that when you include it in a movie, it immediately makes the movie goofy. It's different than what the original movie dealt with, which was an actual real issue that people were concerned about, and something that bled into entertainment in the 50s a lot because of, the giant monster craze and shit like that. But it all leads back to the same idea of put effort into the things that you make, please. Be creative. Make an attempt to be creative. I don't think Natalie Portman made an attempt to be creative with this book. I think she made that book for a publicity stunt and a message. And I think that a lot of Hollywood movies are being made as publicity stunts and messages, and that should not be the case. You should be able to go deeper than that. You should be able to get something more from that, instead of just a ham-fisted message that makes no sense, or that's placed into a film that you saw a better version of 50 years ago. Or however many years ago. That shouldn't be what a film is. But that I thought it was an interesting little comparison to make between what she did with the book and what a lot of Hollywood studios are doing with films today. But I want to know what you think. Do you think that the idea for this book is just as cringe as I do? Do you have any kind of, do you have any remakes that you specifically dislike for various reasons, or that maybe ones that you enjoy? There are ones that I do enjoy. Put those below in the comments below. Again, I usually like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?